That's great. Now, I noticed hopefully there is a bag full of Smarties floating around, because last talk on the conference after a big night last night, yeah, please hand them around. But actually what I'd also like you to do before we start, everyone stand up. Stand up, okay. I'm not going to get you to do the hokey pokey or a little Hawaiian lula. Actually, we could do this, guys. You want to have a go at the Hawaiian lula? That's quite good. Let's see how those hips are. Look, Brad's doing all right. Okay, thank you. But actually, know what? Before you sit down, quick. Now, who has got any wearables on them? Fitbits? Electronics? Who's got a mobile phone in their pocket? Who's got an earpiece on them? Me, permanently attached to me now. Who's got a laptop in their bag? Tablet? No one's got a desktop in there? Mini TV? Digital camera? Tape, oh, there we go. Tape recorder? CD? Oh, wireless dongles. Who's got a wireless dongle? There you go. Okay, well, that's about 6 items. Okay, you can all sit down now. Good. Thank you. Yes, electronics. It's part of our life, and one of the things I do as an aside, besides trying to recycle electronics, is I help run a horse event. And last week we had a major horse event, and I found myself as an event director running around with one wireless in one ear, one electronics in the other ear, and we had mobile phones out tracking times for horses. So electronics is very much part of our life and is definitely not going away. And so, we've obviously heard from Helen and Carmel about what's happening in Australia already. TVs and computers, there's programs in place. Batteries, there's a number of issues. So what I'd like to do is... there we go. What John and I would like to do is explain to you a little bit about what's already happening out there, what are the gaps, where are we going to go in the future, what are the options? And I suppose the key point of this presentation is really to get people to start to think, to start to question, to start looking at new and innovative ways to make this work in a cost-effective way that's not overly extravagant for us to afford, but delivers real, tangible, environmental, social, employment opportunities, a whole range of opportunities, which it can do. Oh God, sorry. That's really bad. Really bad. Sorry. Okay. All right. So now, this e-waste. We've all got electronics. We demonstrated that earlier. Let's talk about the size of the problem. As Carmel said, the National Television Community Recycling Scheme has done a great job. 93,000 tonnes recycled in the first 2 years of the program. There's an estimated 186,000 tonnes out there that is either being recycled by councils, is ending up in landfill, is who knows where. Mobiles. We've been running the mobile phone recycling program MobileMuster since 1998. 1,100 tonnes of mobile phones. As you can see, our tonnes aren't large, but our numbers are huge. That's about 9 million handsets and batteries, but there's still about another 23 million stashed away in cupboards and drawers, and each of you, and I probably have a spare one actually in my handbag, because I keep killing my others, but there's also about 11 million coming in each year, replacing the old ones. So, there are a lot of units. Refrigeration, freezers, air conditioners, 28 million of domestic equipment in stock, 1.3 million reaching the end of life. Fluorescent tubes, a whole nother range. Batteries, the figures that Helen shared with us earlier, they're there. There's lots of products out there, and there's new products coming onto the market. Wearables, that's a big market for the telecommunications industry. iPhones, iWatches, where does that go from there? There's a lot of product out there. So what are we doing about it? We've got the National Television Computer Scheme, we've got nationwide coverage. These programs are funded by industry, so the companies that produce and make and sell the products are involved in some way in covering the costs. MobileMuster, the mobile phone industry program. Cartridges for Planet Arc. Aldi, dealing with batteries. Battery Back, that's a government-funded program. Actually, it's in the wrong spot, should be in the other one. The Australian Battery Recycling Initiative, a group of manufacturers and recyclers working together to try and deliver an outcome. Fluorocycle, producers and users of fluorescent tubes, fluorescent globes, taking on responsibility for that. There are a whole range of activities by government at state and local level, putting money into programs, setting up infrastructure, supporting local councils and so on. And there's also, of course, a range of commercial providers. We have recyclers offering a whole range of services, a fee for service. We've also got, these new programs like a joint initiative, Infoactiv, Storage King and MobileMuster doing the e-waste recycling box. And the only cost is $3.50 to pick up the box. The rest is covered by producers. So that's a really interesting example where consumers and the producers are sharing the cost in a very simple way. So there's lots out there. There's quite a lot happening out there, but there's still a lot that's not covered. And I know a lot of local councils, this is a big bugbear for them, and also for recyclers, is, there's these products out here, and this list has come from the WE directive in Europe. So we have the large household appliances, small electronics, toys. An interesting one, Helen talked about, we have embedded batteries in toys. Where do you start to, do you separate batteries and electronic products? Do you, how do we manage that system? In Europe, they have a WE directive and they have a battery directive. Do we need to go the next step and just have a WE/battery regulation or a framework that helps drive the recovery of that product? Why do we need to separate them? It's an interesting discussion. There's a whole range of other telco equipment that's not covered, and there's handheld batteries. Now, some of this product is of commercial value, material-wise, and there is a natural pull, and the economics of the market is driving that. So there is no need for the subsidy by the government or by producers or retailers to cover that cost. But there are a whole lot of others that aren't. One of the things we want to talk about is there a need for expansion? We need to expand, obviously the list of e-waste that is out there is more than what our current programs can cover. There is stuff still going to landfill, which has resources that can easily be recycled, that can be reused. It's also hazardous. There's a whole range of environmental benefits for doing it that would just, in the long term, can also create a whole lot of social opportunities. Carmel's example of the Endeavour Foundation, there's creating new jobs, building the recycling industry. Look at Near in South Australia, converting a lead smelter into dealing with precious metal processing, so something that can build industry here locally in Australia. So it's not just about the environmental benefits, there's the social benefits, there are economic benefits to the whole activity. We really need to look at expanding our current footprint of activity to address and cover and fill those gaps. So the question is integration the way to go? It's a really interesting question to ask, and I don't think there is, and I know a lot of the people here have been involved in this, there is no single solution. It's about finding a mix of solutions that work given the diversity of materials. We're not talking about the plastic bottle. We're not talking about a piece of cardboard. We're talking about a very complex product that has a range of plastics, glass, precious metals that that has been, a lot of people put their heart and soul in designing and developing, that has delivers a huge amount of benefits for us for a whole range of things, from keeping in touch with family and friends to, paying the bills and a whole range of things. So, we have to really think about what is the best way to recover those materials and reuse them. Some of the other things we need to consider about integration, as a solution for getting this e-waste and filling those gaps and recovering that product. Who is bearing the costs at the moment? What are the current disposal parts for those items that aren't being covered? Are they the right people that should be paying for it? Are the consumers meeting the real costs of using that product? Are the producers and the retailers who benefit from the sale of that product bearing their real costs? Is the community or government covering this unnecessarily, being burdened with the costs that should be spread more relative to the people who make and sell and use the product? And then obviously trying to find more commercial solutions versus subsidised solutions. Where does reuse come into the play? How does reuse of product work? In the mobile phone industry, the second-hand trade market's grown substantially over the last 3 or 4 years. We love to use our technology, we love to upgrade. And so we're turning our phones over every 2 years. And they're still good working phones, and there's a market out there for them. So it's great to see that product's being reused. But there also is that point of end of life. So in terms of how we get to integration, well, no, before I go on to that, the other thing is where does policy reform and regulation come into play? How can government help facilitate and put the right triggers and levers in place to create a commercially driven program, or to create the right incentives and drivers for producers to take on board and accept their responsibilities, or for consumers, but in a cost-effective and efficient way. You know, we really want to, you know, with running MobileMuster for 10 years, we know we've kept the levy that funds it the same for the last 10 years, but we've upped the volume we've collected, we've increased, our performance is up substantially, so we've made it more efficient and cost effective. So you've got to keep driving and deliver those benefits. So in terms of integration and expansion, how do we do this? We need to look at increasing volume for some of our existing schemes, because, you know, obviously there are some programs that are out there where product is still ending up in landfill that needs to get collected, and this is where the operational review, for instance, is a very practical example of re-looking at, well, this is the volume that's actually coming out after running for 2 or 3 years. You can get to see what's happening, and it's similar with Helen's comment about batteries, is you need to see what's happening out there first before you start to do it. You need to be flexible and modify your targets. Do we need to broaden the scope of schemes? This was something Carmel alluded to. You know, where is it appropriate? What's appropriate to extend the TV and computer scheme? They've looked at bringing in TV peripherals. You know, do you include fridges in that one? Maybe not, maybe yes. Who are the people that make those products? Are they the same people who make the TVs and the computers? Is it of value to the producers? Does it make it easier for consumers? Where does integration optimise the recovery of the product? You know, so maximising community convenience, as all of you know from local councils, clear, simple, easy, recycling, accessible is so important to make it happen. Really keeping it simple. You know, Helen clearly identified the challenges of community confusion. Which bin do I put it in? Oh my God. So, you know, we don't want to overcomplicate the whole electronic element of the same. You know, do we have the 4th bin of e-waste? You know, then I think the discussion earlier this morning about the packaging and the CDL and the impact that might have on, there'll be more space in bins because product may be diverted elsewhere. Do we fill that bin up with something else? So we really need to keep thinking about the existing assets we have in place, how we can optimise those, but also how we can share those costs appropriately. And also I think what's really important, and it's a big challenge, and I know that there's more progress and awareness of this, is how councils and state governments who have a legislative responsibility to deal with waste work in partnership with producers who now have a regulatory requirement on them to collect product. So in essence, we now have 3 players responsible for waste collection: state government, local government and producers. So, and each comes from a different framework, and now the 3 have to work together, and it's about trying to get that balance right, where each can work effectively in delivering a really streamlined and efficient system. So the question is do we start stitching our existing schemes together? And before we go to that, just courtesy of Victoria from Infoactiv, she did a bit of research for us. Here's a great example of, you know, people piloting, different countries piloting integrated e-waste collections. And here we've got a whole range of bins taking a diversity of electronic products. And you would have seen in this next slide, halfway down, we've got the City of Sydney collection units there. So we've got batteries, tubes and mobile phones all happening there together. So trying to, when does it make sense to integrate it, and when, you know, obviously having TVs and computers there is not going to work in a library, but trying to be, you know, you have to think about where it's convenient for people to take stuff and how is it more efficient to get it back, and also thinking about what's being delivered to recyclers, making sure that the stream of material that goes to them is consistent, is easy for them to sort and separate, and all those sorts of things. So the question is, product stewardship. It does have a role to play in all of this. What is product stewardship? It's the people who make, sell and use the product take responsibility for it. The producers have the whole cycle. They have a responsibility for in its initial production and design, manufacture, but the retailers, they also benefit from the sale of the product. So they should put up and contribute, whether it's about hosting collection points, providing education, and the user, the consumer. Each of us individually has a responsibility to make sure that product goes back to the right place. And I've got a 2-minute warning. There we go. But, you know, so there is this thing about getting the balance of sharing those costs. It's not, then the question is what's the role of state and local government? Traditionally, they've actually borne this cost, and that is the broader community. We've paid for it through our taxes. And the reason product stewardship was introduced is to try and influence how we consume and use our products and make sure that we respect and use them properly, and not just willy-nilly throw it out and leave it to lie to waste in landfills. So one of the things about product stewardship, there's collective solutions where you have PROs such as MobileMuster or ANZRP or the National TV Scheme, where groups of manufacturers work together collaboratively. And that can be a really good way, an effective way, an efficient way, especially in Australia, where it is quite expensive to run these programs. I mean, Australia is an expensive country, full stop. Doesn't matter, you know, whether you're buying a phone or renting a house in Sydney or trying to collect e-waste. We are expensive. But, you know, how can we minimise that cost? Because we're dealing with international global companies, and they look at us and go, wow, that costs 10 times as much as it costs me elsewhere. You know, and so there's a lot of reticence to get engaged. So if we can find more efficient and effective ways to do that, then we're getting a much better engagement with the producers of the product, and that's really important. There's a role for individual producer responsibility schemes, and it depends on the product, once again. It depends on, there are some things where, I mean, for instance, business and IT, it's quite good for individual companies to work because they have, you know, when you purchase IT for a company, as part of that agreement, procurement agreement, you know, they take back the old product and swap out and those sorts of things. So there is places for that individual producer responsibility. But also coming back to the point I made about how can the producers and the governments work together and recognise they have a shared responsibility and a shared costing commitment, but understanding who bears what costs and not forgetting about the principles of product stewardship and what it's trying to, its original intent is about better design of product, better use of our resources, minimising the impacts of our product. So how does that, you know, we've got to not lose sight of that whole point of what product stewardship's about. You know, it's a, polluter pays concept. And so next steps, and I'm on past my 2 minutes. Do we integrate existing schemes? Which ones? Yes, I think we do. There is opportunity to do that. Do we expand schemes? Yes, I think Carmel's alluded to that. There's a number of electronic products that could easily get picked up into the existing NTCRS. You know, in terms of, from a MobileMuster perspective, I think we could broaden our collection our products we collect to include batteries. You know, we have a fantastic footprint. It's very accessible. We're dealing with small product and we're used to moving small product and batteries already. Where does regulation come into play? Landfill bans. One in South Australia. Victoria's introducing it. It helps push the product. You know, it changes the cost frame. It changes the commercials. But it also creates some issues for local councils. So who's going to fund that? And then so we need to make sure that communities are left holding the basket when a landfill ban comes in, and that, you know, the producers are engaged to help cover and recover those products, and the consumers in some way help fund that cost. And there's a whole range of other government activity that can be done in terms of establishing the infrastructure. And I think in New South Wales EPA, you've got the community recycling centres being established, creating a great framework and footprint across the states. You know, facilitating market development. One of the key, you know, creating a pull-through for the materials is really important. The newspaper industry did a fantastic job of creating, you know, a demand for recycled product, getting back into their papers. I mean, and obviously now they're being replaced electronically, but, you know, the tyres are at this situation as well, where, you know, the offshore market for tyres has fallen out completely. Oil prices have dropped. Plus where some of its stuff was going was probably not ideal. And so now the tyre industry is starting to recognise how can we build, you know, businesses here locally to demand those tyres and to demand those materials. So, you know, a whole range of opportunities out there. So I suppose, just quickly, in summary, and I'll get back to my next page. So there's a lot of e-waste out there and it's growing and it's not going away. Things are happening, but it's pretty disparate, but it's a myriad, it provides a great foundation for where we move forward. So these can form our building blocks and how we can take it forward. And there's opportunities to expand these schemes, there's opportunities to integrate some of these schemes. There's also the need to establish new schemes, and I suppose what I want to do is sort of encourage, or John and I want to do is encourage you guys to think about how we as a group, both government, producers and consumers, can work together to drive better solutions. Thank you.